What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Debbie Row YouTube channel. We are back, another top 10 preview. We're looking at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming in here at number 9 and just kind of talking about what they did last year. Marcus Freeman, 9-4. Started off a little slow, right? They lost those 2 games, to Ohio State, and then they had that bad loss against Marshall, but they bounced back a little bit. So you saw them kind of bounce back there, almost beat USC. So we're going to be diving into that. What is their 2023 outlook? New quarterback play, maybe one of the better quarterbacks that they've had on that roster. What does their schedule look like? What's their depth charts? We're going to be diving into all of that. What's their total? Do we like their over or unders? Everything and above. So if you like college football, hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll give you the Notre Dame team preview after the intro. All right. So like I said, last year, up and down year, 9-4, Marcus Freeman came in there taking over for Kelly. And it was a struggle at first. I think it was an offensive struggle. When you saw what they had last year, Drew Pine was out there. Obviously he transferred. Tyler Bunkner was not their guy. Davis Sherwood played a little bit of games. Their big piece was Michael Mayer, and we'll talk about him being gone. But overall, it was definitely an offensive struggle. It was bad. Their running back room was okay, but their offensive line actually struggled, an area that usually they don't struggle in. Usually Notre Dame's got boys up there. They struggled too, but they started clicking a little bit. That Clemson game kind of comes to mind when they won 35-14 and to turn around a little bit, beat South Carolina in the Gator Bowl. But let's talk about this year. Like, what do we expect this year? Freeman's got a lot of pressure on him. It wasn't like they left the cover dry down there. Like, there was things down there. So what is this looking like? What's this offensive line looking like this year?
Headlined by Joe Alt. That's
Yeah,
obviously,
stud.
he is a stud. He's, one of the top 3 offensive tackles in the nation, probably. He's going to make it easier for Billy Shrout, the redshirt freshman next to him, to be an impact player. They're also returning Zeke Correll, and they have Blake Fisher on the right side. Andrew Kristovic, I probably messed that one up. I'm sorry. But he played a little bit, was okay in his snaps, but like nothing spectacular. I think, I keep talking about consistency, continuity on these things. Having the 2 tackles returning is going to be big for them. I think it's a big thing for Sam Hartman to have time in the pocket because that's all he's ever known in that Wake Forest offense with that long mesh. This isn't going to look like that. But I think, having those 2 tackles, they're feeling probably better about this offensive line heading into this year than what they got on the field in 2022.
Yeah, they clicked a little bit, and you saw that consistency a little bit. You did. You saw it a little bit towards the middle of the year, and that's why I think that you saw them do better. Like, I think that is why you saw them kind of, they went on those, I think it was a 5-game win streak right there before they lost to USC, and that is where it came from, and they were kind of elevate that offense. Overall, when you're looking at just the offense as a whole, so Sam Hartman, I think, is the big one, right? So we're thinking of Sam. He comes over there, at Wake Forest. He had 12,967 passing yards, 110 touchdowns. So he threw it, and they mentioned this, and the Notre Dame kind of preview guides as I was going through it. They were like, "Hey, not since Brady Quinn have we really had a Notre Dame quarterback where we're like, hey, they can put up a bunch of yards." And I think that's true. I will say, like, the strength of this offense though is that running back room. Like, Estime is there, Payne is also going to be there. So when you're looking at just overall, Drew Darian Price, you're looking at Jeremiah Love. I know you like him. Devin Ford transfer. Like, that is a pretty good solid group, like a very safe floor group. The wide receivers again, though, Notre Dame, man, there's no Jeff Smarzer walking through that door, baby. Like, there's not. They have a couple guys when you're looking at kind of Jaden Greathouse and some other guys there. Merriweather was there. Jaden Thomas was their second leading receiver after Michael Mayer last year. Tight end room, I mean, they're going to be good. Mitchell Evans, Holden Stays, those guys are going to be good just because of this offense. What do you think of this offense as a whole? Do you think it's going to be better than last year just because of Hartman? And then, do they have the pieces out there, the weapons to win consistently?
I think Hartman raises their floor. I think that team was certainly hindered by bad quarterback play last year, like we talked about. But the driving force of this offense, like you said, is this running back room. Estime is really good. I think he's starting to get some NFL draft buzz, which I love to see. Because I think a lot of people in the Debbie community specifically had kind of written him off after the early injury and not getting on the field. Jeremiah Love is a player I think could be used as a nice little weapon out of the backfield. They transferred Chris Tyree over to the wide receiver room. He's right now projected to be the starting slot wide receiver. I think he probably keeps that. Jaden Greathouse probably moves over to that Z role
Yeah.
because I think that that is a role that he would fill quite nicely. But that means that, and I'm sure Tyree will get his fair share of backfield snaps. He has that. But I think when you're looking at a pass catching running back and what they're looking for, Jeremiah Love could be one of those guys that sneaks up on people and gets on the field a little bit earlier than some may expect, because I don't have, Jaden Thomas is okay. I don't have a ton of faith in these pass catchers. They lost
No.
Michael Mayer. That's the big loss, obviously, but it goes without saying how much he bailed out bad quarterback play with his contested catch ability, his reliability. They need someone in this pass catching room to step up and be that. And
Yeah.
I'm not certain that I see that guy specifically on this roster right now.
No, I don't think so either, right? And then that's where you would hope that they can kind of move it around a little bit, kind of lean on that rushing attack. But there's a lot of ifs in this offense. Like this is one of these offenses, like really realistically, of the last 15 teams that we've done, like a lot of it's like offense. Hey, offense is going to be good. How is their defense going to play? Where on this at Notre Dame, it's like, hey, there's a lot of missing cogs. There's some pieces here, and I know they've talked about Hartman going to Notre Dame, and then Tommy Reese going to Alabama. And how much does he really want to play there? Do you want to play for Reese? Obviously, he's there, and obviously they gave him a little NIL on the side there. But I think that's just something to note. I think when you're talking about this offense as a whole, notable losses. I put a lot of guys on here. Notable is probably Michael Mayer. We didn't really talk about Lorenzo Styles leaving, but he's no longer a wide receiver now. So like, I don't know what that means. Like he's at Ohio State, so maybe not from the offensive perspective there. Tyler Bunkner, obviously, I don't necessarily think if he starts Alabama, I'd be shocked. I know crazy things have happened. Drew Pine, that was probably a good, a subtraction that they don't really need him. I know Freeman talked about, hey, we're going to go get a quarterback in the transfer portal. Logan Diggs maybe is the big one. I think the loss for them, losing him and that even though they had a very good backfield, that depth piece going to LSU, I think Logan's pretty good. So I think that would be him and Mayer are the two big ones.
Yeah, I think Jarrett Patterson's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Good guard, inconsistent at times. He transferred over from center, and he was playing guard last year. But yeah, the Lorenzo Styles thing is interesting because we see these players transfer to Ohio State, try a position change, and then end up right back in their same position. They did that with their running back last year. Logan Diggs going to LSU, right? That's a good fit for him. That's a big loss though, and that's why I think Jeremiah Love has an opportunity to get on the field. I also I didn't mention it. I like Jabran Payne a bit too. I think this is going to be a decently sized committee, and so maybe that helps kind of
Mm-hmm.
ease that loss of Logan Diggs.
Yeah. 100%. I didn't put tackle Caleb Johnson on here. He went to SMU, but I mean, you could have thrown him on there as well. As far as the recruiting class, like not a bad recruiting class. They're number 13 overall ranked, 12th composite. Obviously, transfer is going to be down. We'll get into that. They're in the 40 range. Offensively, I thought they did a good job. Going through and getting some guys. Offensive tackle, you like Jeremiah Love. Braylon James, wide receiver, that could be their guy, 6'2", 185 in terms of maybe having those nice guys. Kenny Minchie is a guy that we both like at the quarterback position in terms of like next year, like can really step in there. Cooper Flanagan, Jaden Greathouse, he was an absolute stud in high school. This kid absolutely tore it up in Texas at a highly competitive, state and in 6A ball, I believe. He won MVP of the league his junior year, but just produced. And you saw that in the spring game. And like that could be that next wide receiver they need. But overall, good play. When you're recruiting at Notre Dame, it's a little different than recruiting at other places. Not to say that other places have it easier, but they do. I mean, you're basically shopping in a different aisle. That's what David Shaw used to say at Stanford. It's the same for Notre Dame, but they did a good job here.
Yeah, you mentioned Kenny Minchie. I think learning under Sam Hartman for a year is going to be really good for him, even
Yeah.
though I think that he's one of the more ready quarterbacks to go. So I wouldn't be shocked if we do see a Hartman injury of some sort, if Minchie is that next guy up and then he never gives the job back. Smart player. I think he's a fun player to watch, but I think, building chemistry with Jeremiah Love, Braylon James, Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores, like that's going to be important for this team's success moving forward. I don't see a whole lot of impact players outside of maybe Love and Greathouse for this year, but also that wide receiver room's open. So one of Braylon James, Rico
Yeah.
Flores, some of these guys, Caleb Smith even, could go out there and maybe earn some snaps.
Yeah, and I think one thing to know for Minchie is he got hurt his senior year, so he didn't play 4 games. But in those 4 games, we did see his completion percentage jump up. Had he played the whole year, we talk about maybe a little higher of recruit, like in terms of what his recruiting status would have been. And he was already 14, but maybe he was a top 10 kid. I like him a lot. I think he exhibits very, very good instincts, and his ability to get on the outside and kind of be that athlete, get outside the pocket, is a little different with the arm that we've seen at Notre Dame in the past with their quarterbacks. Like I think that's what separates him. I actually like him. I've had him in some Devies, some college fantasy leagues. I don't mind adding him as like a stash because I do think he's going to be good there. As far as key transfers, we've talked about these guys: Sam Hartman, Devin Ford, Caleb Smith's another guy that we didn't necessarily. We didn't talk about. They've said that he's had a pretty good campus for that wide receiver room. Maybe he does something there. But it's Sam Hartman, right? And then Devin Ford, maybe, but Sam's the guy.
Yeah, Sam Hartman's the key transfer
Yeah.
specifically because, I mean, this offense rides with him, right? I think he's a fine quarterback. I think I've seen some lists recently, and I remember the Sam Hartman draft buzz and how people were pushing for him to potentially be a first rounder, and I just don't think that that's in his cards. I don't
No.
necessarily think he has the arm talent to do those things, but he's a smart player. He's played a lot of football. He is able to push the ball downfield, which is something that this offense needs desperately. If they can get one of these receivers that can also win downfield, I think it's going to introduce a completely different element to this Notre Dame offense this year.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's go to when you're talking about impact players, Hartman, Estime, great house. I put him on there. Chris Tyree, I think and Mitchell Evans is out there, the tight end room. For me, I'm just gonna highlight Chris Tyree. If he can step up and kind of be that slot guy, or just be that guy to go gets targets for Hartman, and they can kind of have that. They desperately need someone in that wide receiver room to step up, and that's for me is him. And if Great House can do it, great. As a freshman, you'd like to see that impact. Maybe he can have one of those years like Xavier Worthy, some of these other guys that we've seen as freshmen. But me, it's Chris Tyree. This offense really needs him to step up, almost like an Aeneas Smith type role for Texas A&M. If you know anything about them, if he can have that kind of a role and impact on this offense, we're looking at a better season for them.
Yeah, for sure. Estime is the guy for me. I expect a big year from him. He's got a lot of burst for a bigger back.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the ability to, bounce off tackles, and I think he's got good vision. And when you're talking about an improved offensive line, I think, while I said this offense goes with Sam Hartman, I think the running backs are going to set the tone and allow Hartman to work off of play action and things like that. That's where he does his best work is off of play action. So I'm excited to see what that all looks like. But yeah, I mean, it, someone has to step up and be an impact player from that wide receiver room. And so I'd love for it to be Tyree because I do think he's a talented player, but someone, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who it is at this point, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, when we go over the defensive side, they had a weird defense last year. So they were like top 40 in opponents' points per game. So they didn't necessarily give that, but their red zone defense was awful. Like when you're looking at their collapse in the red zone, they were 130th nationally, allowing 32 scores and 34 possessions in the red zone. They just didn't get takeaways, and they just didn't have that for them. They lose some guys. Isaiah Foskey, he was the school record holder for sacks, so they lost him. What do they got coming back? How does this defense look like it's shaping up?
Well, Isaiah Foskey is a big loss. That was
Yeah.
a very talented player that got he lost in the shuffle in NFL draft circles, and then he got drafted pretty highly. So I was pretty happy with that myself. But I think the player I want to highlight is Javonte Jean Baptiste. I think he is one of those guys that can step in and kind of fill that role. A lot of what they have coming back is just a lot of we've talked about a lot of these defense being a lot of good players, but maybe not a great player. That's what this defense looks like to me. I like Xavier Watts there in the back as a nice little safety to anchor down the secondary. I like JD Bertrand in the middle there, but there are a lot of just still question marks that I think will need to be sorted out this year. I do think that this is an extremely well coached defense, and that's the reason they
Yeah.
can be so efficient. But yeah, this is definitely a team that they're going to need some people to step up.
Yeah, and especially just because of what they lost. Foskey's. I love watching him play. I thought Foskey was like. I still think he's underrated. Like I think that he
Mhm.
is one of those kids that is going to have a very very big impact to the next level. Prince, Colley is another one. Transfers. They lost a little bit in the transfer portal. When you look at what they did, Prince left to Vanderbilt. Jacob Lacey is the guy for me. We talked about him when we did Oklahoma, and we said, hey man, he could be an impact player on that defensive line. So if we're going to talk about him being an impact player in Oklahoma, he's got to be a notable loss loss over on the other side. And that's someone that, definitely, when you look at him, obviously he didn't have the production that probably they wanted at Notre Dame, but he was there. When you're looking at that, he played in the first 4 games last year, 5 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. And he kept that year of eligibility. He's and that's a big loss for this defensive line. They did target defensive line. We'll talk about the transfers, but I think that's where they kind of lose. That defensive line, you could tell right there, 3 guys on that line.
Yeah, Adam Alola also played over 400 snaps last year, so that's a big
Yeah,
thing. And then add Brandon Joseph to this list as
can.
well. A guy that I think was fine last year, maybe didn't live up to the hype that we expected. Early in his career, but he was a good player, and he's currently in the NFL. So I think that when you talk about those losses start to stack up a little bit, I do think that they have some pieces that could step up and kind of fill those holes, though.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's there. We'll get into the transfers. But before we do that, recruits, overall, I thought this was a good class. Ranking these things as I've gone through these, I would say these are two on terms of offensive, defensive side. I think it's pretty even. What they went out and targeted, they have to be very they have to be surgical on how they get these guys. Armel Mukam, and then you have, Traore there, Christian Gray, Bowen, Minch. They have guys that are out there. I really liked, when they got a lot of 4-star kids. They didn't bring in a lot of 3 stars in terms of that defensive side. And you have to really like that. Even Preston Zenter, he was a 4 or 3-star kid, depending on where you looked at what recruiting services. Britton Vernon, I think, is an underrated guy. He's 6'5", 275 out of Ohio. Big kid, defensive line, can kind of play there. But you can see where they targeted, and they did well in that secondary.
Yeah, I mean the kid's from Ohio, so he's probably pretty good at something. So, no, I agree. I think targeting those 4 stars is something Notre Dame always does well, recruiting. But on both sides of the ball, that may have been the case, but I feel like they always tend to get like the players that maybe not everyone wanted at that point. This year, I think they went out and got some dudes that a lot of people wanted on both sides. So I think this is a good class. Like they build from within. The very interesting thing is that they are now experiencing this transfer portal at a high rate on both sides of the ball. So I hope that these guys kind of buy into the program, are here for quite a while. But yeah, I mean, I like Armel as one of those guys that can kind of step in and maybe fill some type of role early. But this is more, I see a lot of guys that are future players.
And I know they like Bell, Mika Bell down there, cornerback. Everything they talk about, his brother actually plays for Georgia as a wide receiver. They just talk about athleticism, but I think the big thing, they said he could be an early option on special teams, and that's returning kicks and covering them. And they like that. If he can get out there with his speed and in terms of that, he has sub 10.5 in 100-meter times, excellent points in the 200 long jump. So he's an athlete. If they can get him out there, and maybe that's the weapon they need. Maybe it's going to come on kickoff return, like those type of like areas. They like Bell, and I do think that's noticeable. They say as a defensive back and corner, he's going to have some time, but they might just get him out there as a weapon, right? We might see the reverse of what we looked at, with those other guys that we were talking about. He could be that guy on that special teams. Transfers, I think they went out and they got their edge. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, right? Got him from Ohio State, so I love that. I'm going to love that when Ohio State guy leaves. Thomas Harper, Antonio Carter II. Anybody stand out here for you?
Jean-Baptiste, I mean, I think he's a good player. I think it's one of those things where he might not have gotten as much run as he preferred at Ohio State, and so he goes to a program that is certainly going to need him. So he's going to be on the field a lot, and I think he's a pretty talented player.
Yeah, I mean, that's the guy. I mean, they went out and got him because they want him to be a difference maker on that side. Like, to me, that's the guy that's going to be stepping up for them. I know Harper is probably going to start. He's kind of in that range, and he's got experience. So I think that was for that. These two guys are definitely experienced guys. Antonio Carter looks like kind of a backup, maybe at that safety position, but good depth. Impact players, for me, Benjamin Morris, JD Bertrand, Cam Hart, Jean-Baptiste, those guys, to me, if I was going to highlight someone, it definitely would be Jean, just because I do think that they need that sack guy for Foskey. They're going to have to replenish that and get that back. Who do you feel like is the impact player, or maybe someone that's not on here either?
So I've talked about Jean-Baptiste enough. I think Cam Hart is one of those guys that just needs to take a little step forward. He
Yeah.
played a ton last year, and he was good at times. I think, as a run defending corner, he was good. He always filled his gaps pretty well, and he kind of was able to take away the edge sometimes. In coverage, it was hit or miss. And so what I want to see is, can he be that guy that, you can throw him in man coverage and feel comfortable with that? Right now, I don't know if he's there, but these kids in this program and specifically in this secondary and on this defense traditionally take massive leaps forward. I think Cam Hart could be that player this year.
Yeah, and I do think their secondary, with Benjamin Morris, if he can kind of take that next step as well. Last year you did see him. He had 6 interceptions, and he had 3 against Boston College and 2 against Clemson. So you did see him kind of be that playmaker. If they take that next step, then yeah, this team defensively is just solid. Like that, they're very just. I don't want to say average because then Irish fans are gonna be mad at me. But like both sides of the ball, they feel like just solid, right? Like we're not talking like
Yeah.
high ceilings, but pretty high floors when we're talking about both these areas. When we're looking at the schedule, they got Navy. I mean, we've seen that game before. We know what Navy's going to do. But again, we'll see where that goes. Tennessee State, NC State, Central Michigan. Obviously, the big game's Ohio State, right? And then you got Duke, Louisville. Louisville is going to be tough in that passing offense now. So when we think of Louisville, it's a little different. Then USC is a big one. And Pittsburgh, Clemson, Wake Forest, Stanford. I mean, you're talking about, yeah, they play a tough schedule because they're Notre Dame and they're independent. They're going to be playing these guys. What do we think about this schedule? And this isn't as tough as I've seen Notre Dame's schedule, but they definitely got to come out ready to go.
Yeah, the kicker here is that you've got a pretty brutal 6-game stretch there in the middle with Ohio State. I think at Duke is
Duke's
low
not,
key.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's a tough game, and when you're coming off probably an Ohio State loss, though I wouldn't put that in pen yet. I'd still pencil that in as a loss against Ohio State. But when you're coming off of that, going to Duke, potentially seeing a Heisman-esque quarterback in Riley Leonard, we'll see if he takes that step forward, but that's a difficult game. Louisville is going to be a tough game. I think that they pull out in that one. USC, I don't know that this defense is going to have the ability to stop Caleb Williams in that offense. So then you're looking at that as a loss. You wedge Pittsburgh in between USC and Clemson, and while I don't have a ton of faith in Pittsburgh and Phil Jurkovich, Jurkovic, I don't care how to say his name. I'm so done with that guy being in college football. But when you kind of wedge that game in between those two games, it feels like it could be one of those letdown games. It's tough. And then at Clemson, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if that was a home game. But I think they can, build some momentum with that Wake Forest. That's a Sam Hartman revenge game, which will be fun. And then Stanford isn't even really a real Power 5 team anymore. It doesn't seem so.
no.
Um, what's their over under, Kevin?
8.5.
Boy, oh boy, is that a good line. Man, I think this is an 8 to 9 win team. I think this is probably a 9-win team, but there are a few games where I get a little nervous. And so sitting here at number 9 in the rankings, I'm sorry, Fighting Irish fans. I just feel like that's a little too rich for me.
Yeah.
Put them in the 20s and I feel comfortable with it, but I think I'd probably hit the under there.
I laugh because at the beginning of this, I said they didn't have terrible schedule, but then I looked at my notes and I said they had the 14th hardest schedule in college football based on its combined win total from last season, their opponents, and then they
Yeah.
do play 8 games this season against teams that finished above 500 last year. And yeah, I mean that's tough. I think Wake Forest is gonna be a little bit better when we're thinking of it. I'm gonna go under. I think 8 is the number. Like if I had to pick I think 8 is the number, and then they get to 9 wins in the bowl just like last year. And now will that be enough for Notre Dame fans? Are they going to be upset with that? Right. I think that's the question. Is Freeman going to be a little bit on the hot seat now? Like, he missed out on some offensive coordinators. There's some questions about that overall. But yeah, I put him at 8-ish. If they can get a win though, that middle stretch there, I think the question is going to be is can that secondary be as good as they were last year, take that next step, because they're going to be playing against very, very, heavy pass teams there. Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, USC, Pittsburgh, like Clemson, we're talking there. So if that secondary is up for the challenge, then yes, I think that they're going to get over 8.5. But if not, 8's probably the number I'm at. So I'm going to stay at 8.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'll hit that under as well. I think, when we talk about the future outlook of these teams, I think they should give Freeman one more year because I think when you've had to patchwork a lot of what kind of transpired with Brian Kelly to transfer to LSU, I think it's difficult to expect a lot, and I think you need to give it a full, 3 to 4 year cycle of getting your own recruits in here. And when we talk about the future outlook of this team, CJ Carr is the highlight of the
Yeah.
2024 class, and
Trader.
yeah, sorry, Kevin, but I think that giving Freeman the opportunity to kind of, deliver on that and giving a true freshman kind of reins to take the program to a different level, I think that's a smart move. But I also get a little nervous that they're going to be trigger happy, and 8 wins
Yeah.
won't even be enough for him to keep his job. So it's tough.
It's gonna be close. I think he deserves one more year. What do you guys think, Irish fans? You think he deserves another year? Let's say he goes 8 wins. You feel like that's a bowl game. Like, what are your expectations there? And with the change of the landscape too in college football, will they go to the ACC? Are they going to stay independent? I mean, there's a lot of pressure on them, and overall, and like they'd be smart to stay independent though, because I think they can make the playoff more if they stay independent. To be honest with you guys, but yeah, I think overall, moving forward, they have a very a path. Now, will they stick to that path? I think that's the question in terms of that. And again, we're seeing people hire offensive coaches more, right? So Freeman might not fit that mold. Like Freeman might not be that guy for them and be more of a coordinator. But hey, I like Freeman. I think he can step up and do that. So appreciate you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. Let us know what you think about Notre Dame. Do you feel like a top 10 rating is too high, or are we crazy? Do you think that Notre Dame's going to show us out? We're going to get Notre Dame fans yelling at us. They're very passionate fans, and we love you guys. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys on the next one.